All right. There we go. Welcome to the Hip Hop Hustle podcast. I'm extremely excited about my next guest, the one and only the Inphamus Amadeuz, veteran in hip hop. Literally, man, you do it all. Artist, producer, you make films, videographer. Literally, when I was looking at all your accomplishments, I was like, I don't understand how this guy manages it all with all the time. You're on the radio as well. Sirius, was it Shade 45? You're on the radio. You've got EPs, Infamous Life, and The Soul that came out this year. You got singles, Stay Out of My Way. Literally, it's like, for people who are listening, you're setting an example of what can be accomplished in terms of how many different fields you can be successful at.
Thank you. And I learned early on when I had made a decision that maybe being an MC wasn't going to be my way in. I kind of looked in the room around me and I'm like, okay, I'm around a bunch of guys that only know how to do one thing, and that's rap. Nobody understands this concept. No one understands film. No one understands radio. No one understands that this is a business. So I kind of made the decision that if I was going to be successful, I would kind of need to be the person to do it. And, here we are. And I'm grateful that I've been able to accomplish so much. And even with me accomplishing all these different things that you just spoke about, people still want to hear me create music at the same time, right? So I'm just blessed to be able to be in that position.
That's an interesting mindset, that you realized that your way was not through necessarily being an MC. How old were you? What was that realization like? Where were you at in your career thus far?
So I was in between a single song deal that I had with Universal Music Group and Def Jam trying to acquire my album, Any Day Now, the first Any Day Now. And music was changing. Auto-tune was introduced. And I think people were infatuated with auto-tune in the beginning, specifically with T-Pain, because you couldn't really tell if he could sing or not. But, once I saw someone like Lil Wayne do it, that for a fact that he's not vocally talented as a singer, and then Kanye, and it kind of just took over the landscape, I realized that maybe terrestrial radio and other avenues and record labels will be transitioning from traditional lyrics to more of a melodic way of consuming music. So, I said, what, maybe by default, just because of the year I was born, let's say, right? If I was born 10 years earlier, then maybe rap could have been a path for me. But at that point, I just said to myself, you know what? I'm going to need to do something if I plan on being relevant like today in 2023. I'm going to need to figure out something. And I quickly realized that, although we idolize rappers, although we look at rappers as the face of the brands, the people behind them are the ones that push the buttons. The people behind them are the ones with multiple acres of land. And I need to figure out a way where I can get into that space. But more importantly, put myself in a space where if I wanted to create music at leisure, I would be able to do that without going through the obstacles of an independent artist. So that was kind of my decision. And I had to lay out a plan where it's like, okay, these are the things that I'm missing. Let me just start checking one thing off at a time.
And what was the first thing you decided to check off?
Well, I grew up in an area where we didn't know anybody, where, I didn't grow up like Queensbridge, where a bunch of rappers, there was no way in to the industry. It's a way to meet people, and obviously sex sells. It always has since the beginning of time. So me and my wife, we decided to create a modeling agency called the Get At 'Em Girls. That was my way. I had a video director who lived in my neighborhood, Mills Miller. He had just shot this fabulous video. I forgot the name. I hit him up. I'm like, listen, I got girls for your videos. If you need some girls, he's like, yeah, come through. And then from there, we started meeting different directors, and that just cascaded into like a whole movement where we had like 23 girls under us as models, and we were doing, videos for 50 Cent and Fabulous and Two Chains and this guy and that guy, and that was kind of my introduction into the music industry, which naturally segued into film and into I Get Out of Magazine, which was kind of like people's first introduction to me as an entrepreneur, as opposed to being a lyricist. But again, I needed a way in, right? A lot of guys get in by default. A lot of people get in by, this person, your mom knows this person. We recently figured out that Travis Scott, right? Dad taught DJ Premier how to play drums, right? So when Travis Scott goes into a meeting with Kanye West, there's still that phone call that happens. Still a phone call. Like Premier calls, Kanye, listen, this is my homeboy's son, look out. It's always kind of that way when it comes to hip hop. So, I needed to figure out the workaround, and the models were the beginning of what you see now.
Well, I think it just shows that, like, if you really want it bad enough, you just got to find where the demand is, where the gap in the market is. Because, like, you ended up making videos for all the legendary artists. I mean, the list, like, go on. You said, 50 Cent, but Prodigy, of Mobb Deep. You have Jazzo, Uncle Murder, Styles P, Jadakiss. The list literally just keeps going on and on and on. So it's like, it's not like you're just talking about it saying, hey, this is what I did. It literally kicked it all off.
Yeah. I mean, I often find, and I try to relay this to artists and just people in general that are trying to accomplish something, like we tend to limit ourselves by saying that we can't, right? We can't do this, we can't do that, whether it's social programming or whatever the reason is. With me, I've always seen the world in a different place, and I never seen any limitations, no matter what my upbringing was or financial status as a child or whatever it is, right? Whatever I want to accomplish in life, I can accomplish. But the question is, who's going to put the work to do it, right? Who's actually going to go and do it? If I want to learn how to be a videographer, I can learn to do that. If I want to learn how to be a producer, I can learn to do that. If I want to learn to be a DJ, I can learn. Like, I'm not a DJ by trade. So none of these things that people have seen me do throughout my career, except being an MC. Because being an MC, that would be my trade, right? But these are just acquired talents that I've learned throughout the years by just not making excuses. We got to stop making excuses. If you want to go do something, get your ass off the fucking couch and go do it. Period. I just been blessed, like, as you said, to work with so many different people. Prodigy in particular. Prodigy was kind of the end of my film career. Because I grew up listening to Mobb Deep, right? You can hear the influence in everything I do. And to be able to shoot Prodigy's last music video before he passed was, just as a personal treasure that I could take with me. That was something amazing. Obviously, we didn't know that was going to be the last one. But that's something that I treasure, and something that I felt like I had hit my plateau as a director, because things were changing, music was changing. The demand for lyricists or even older artists was not there around that time. That was like maybe 2016 or 17. But don't quote me on it, but somewhere around that time. So I decided to pivot, as I've always done throughout my career.
Well, let me ask you, you touched on something really interesting, obviously, using the Travis Scott and DJ Premier example. But do you think that is hip hop, that it's literally about who you know, not what you know or the talent that you have?
I think business in general, I think a lot of people forget that this is the music business, and only 10% of this in this business. So in business, you can maneuver without money by having relationships. That's how we maneuver in life. So I don't want to say there's favoritism, because there is favoritism, but there is a certain level of relationships and keeping good practices with people that can give you a boost along the way, right? So, had Travis Scott went into that meeting with Kanye without the DJ Premier phone call, maybe he would have been less receptive. I mean, how many artists are trying to get to Kanye at that time, right? But when you get that phone call, and Premier is like Kanye's idol as a producer, right? So when you get that phone call, there's going to be a certain level of care that you're going to take with it when you're stepping into that situation. So I do think that relationships are probably the most important thing in this industry or in any industry. Of course, money, of course, those things. But if you solve relationships, you can skip life.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard that relationships, you're not the only one to tell me that like relationships are the thing that will get you to where you want to go. That ultimately, like there are a lot of people in the industry that are talented, are fantastic, but they suck at maintaining and building relationships. They cannot be trusted. And you see them go nowhere because people don't want to work with them. They never know what they're going to get.
Yeah, correct. And that's kind of like I think that's just life in general. I know the conversation is based around hip hop, but generally speaking, relationships are important. The ones you keep, they can be of value to you, but the ones that you damage can hurt you along the way. If you burn the wrong bridges, you won't be able to cross.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we talk about hip hop and say it's a sport and it's a competition, and I feel like sometimes there's this mindset of like, because we're always competing, it's always me versus you. It's not the space where like we all work together, and I feel like that's sometimes damaging for artists when they come in, is like, because they come in with the mentality of me versus you, they're always got their backup, they're always got the defensive side, but ultimately you're right, the artist is the face and most of the business is behind it, and those people don't want trouble. They just want to make money at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what kind of anyone gets into hip hop. Maybe not in the beginning. In the beginning it was for the love of the culture. The five elements, the graffiti, the b-boying, the DJing, being an MC. But ultimately, it's a way for us to get out of our financial infrastructures, growing up in low poverty situations. And then you also have to remember that we're dealing with the majority of people, with the exception of few, are from low income situations. And you're socially programmed to be me against you at all times, right? And you can kind of see that spill over when you watch the landscape of hip hop and the way certain artists interact, the way certain labels interact, even the podcasters and DJs interact. You kind of see the way that we've been trained just as human beings to operate on a day-to-day basis. Of course, we would wish that there would be more unity. But how do we get there is the question. Like, how do we, you don't see posse cuts anymore, right? I don't remember the last time it was a posse cut. Like multiple artists, what space you see that in? Like in the Spanish market. Like, I think the Spanish market has done a great job of maintaining that aspect of just music creation, because a lot of them are from low income situations. No, low income. They're from third world countries. The Dominican Republic. I mean, Puerto Rico is a part of the United States, but it's damn near a third world country, right? And they've had a good idea on how to get it together. So it's like, how do we do it as hip hop artists? And it won't be done until we start breaking hip hop down into genres. I think they just have everybody in one melting pot. You got Nas competing with Little Baby for Grammy Awards. It's not fair to either one of them, right? I mean, Lil Baby sounds like one way and Nas sounds another way. Like, why are you putting guys in the same space? So it's almost like, if you want to put it, the powers that be are purposely putting people to compete against each other, when you can put people in a living space where everyone can compete and everyone can be successful.
Well, why do you think they do that? Why do you think they refuse to separate it and they just want it to be together? I mean, part of me as a cynic, I'm like, well, because the conflict and the conversation is good for business.
I think one of the reasons why is because hip hop didn't create anything. Hip hop recreated everything. So, like, how do you properly define what hip hop is, right? If you look at early records, they were basically drum loops over disco beats, right? And you take a loop from an Earth, Wind, and Fire sample, and then you take a drum from James Brown, you put it together and have a guy rapping on it, and that's a rap song. Um, so that's one reason why. Also, I also think that there's no defining sound, and this is just my opinion coming from radio. There's not one sound that dominates hip hop. It's not drill. It's not West Coast. It's kind of personal preference, and I think at this point, it's niche audiences. So you follow people for a certain reason. So people probably follow you because you have like an authentic hip hop podcast. But if you started doing mechanic work, on Instagram, people would be like, that's not what I'm looking for, right? So it's just going to take one bright mind to create the subgenre space, and it's really just as simple as distributing a record under another subgenre. That's they're not giving you the option, so it'll take someone like a TuneCore or someone at DistroKid or even someone at Universal Music Group to say, okay, well, this Lil Baby record sounds like a trap record. Let me categorize it under that. Well, guess what? Grandmaster Caz is dropping a hip hop joint. It sounds like an old school. Let's do classic hip hop. It's just really up to the distribution companies. But as we know, there's no A&R, there's no artist development anymore. So it's kind of like people just kind of give you the cosign and go. So I guess your guess is as good as mine, right? Like, how do we rectify the situation?
But it's interesting that you bring it up and you talk about it as classic hip hop. Like, I think that almost you need to look at the classic albums to define it as like what traditional hip hop is and then what everything as a subgenre is. Because like the classic albums are classic albums because they essentially hit elements of hip hop of what we've seen it through the founding fathers and over time maintain. Even modern albums seem to maintain that feeling. But then the ones who are just like, oh, this is a new sound, but is it a classic? Probably not. Means it is probably in a different genre. Maybe it's a classic in that genre as opposed to traditional hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I would, categorize, albums in the 90s and the 80s as classic hip hop. And then if you create something in that space, then you would categorize it as that. But there's so many different versions of hip hop, right? You have Miami bass. There's no longer a trap sound. Trap died with Jeezy and T.I. So what are these kids creating now? In Atlanta, like, what do we call it? Melodic? Drill music in New York is like, okay, it's drill, but there's so many different variations of that. I mean, these kids are literally doing like almost like dubstep with records. And then you have guys like Griselda who are creating, it's not even boom bap. So what do we call that? Modern hip hop? It's not traditional boom bap. There's nothing that they're doing that's traditional about it. It's slower pace. It's it's loop samples with no drums. So I think the meeting of the minds need to kind of sit down and figure out where do we go and how to create the space. But I do think that Hip Hop 50 has at least started the conversation, right? If you look at who is the top selling artist when it comes to physical tickets, it's not Drake, it's not Lil Uzi Vert, it's 50 Cent. 50 Cent is literally killing these guys right now. And you can kind of see the way the concert structure is going. They're starting to revert back because they kind of see where the audience is. And, there is a market for classic hip hop artists or traditional hip hop artists, quote unquote. It's just about tapping in. And I think companies this year figured out a way to make money off of it. So we'll just see where it goes from there.
Well, why do you think 50 is outselling modern artists? Because, I mean, 50, he's obviously been in the genre for a long period of time, but he hasn't dropped a classic album in, what is it, like close to 20 years since a classic album. Like, he's been releasing a bit of music. Obviously, he's got stars now, and he's not even that focused on it anymore. But, like, for him to be outselling artists who are predominantly solo artists is almost insane.
Well, I think one of the things that he did was embrace younger artists. He'll drop a record and put like a young Rowdy Rich on it, or he'll have the theme song, The Power, and put an artist like LH. So he's been able to keep himself relevant in a way that other artists in the space haven't been able to. Like he's been relevant this whole time. He represents everything urban culture is. It's fashion. He's controversial, and at the end of the day, he still makes good music, right? So I think with him being able to do for at least be receptive in a way that other guys have shunned upon, where 90s artists, like I can't even name one, but you probably wouldn't hear like Mobb Deep with Fabio Foreign on the record, right? But it would be more likely to see 50 Cent do that. And he's just a marketing genius, and I think you're seeing the results of that now with this Final Lap tour.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's coming to Australia and he's got shows sold out. And I saw him the first time he came out to Australia. Like, he was the first guy that got me into hip hop. Like, Get Rich or Die Trying, I used to fall asleep to that album. Like, nice. And I think there is something about like the nostalgia of it. It represents a lot for a lot of people in hip hop, and he represents a lot in terms of similar to yourself in a way that like you can transition throughout your career and do multiple things, and you don't just have to be an artist. Like, he's more than 50 right now. He's Curtis Jackson to the max, and he talks about it in his books. And I've always looked at him and been like, that's something to aspire to, in the sense of being maneuverable and being flexible enough to really see the trends, see what's happening, and adapt accordingly.
Of course, and also recognizing the market and kind of seeing like what I started to show off with, where it's like, the guys that are super rich are the ones pushing the buttons. I mean, you may have a deal with Interscope Records, but who's the richest person on Interscope? Jimmy Iovine, right? The guy pushing the buttons. I've always watched guys like 50 or even on like Russell Simmons or Jermaine Dupri or even Diddy to a certain extent. Jay-Z, kind of seeing like how they moved in other spaces. Master P, right? Seeing how they move in other spaces besides rap music. Rap music is the way for us to get in. But once we're in the door, we need to navigate to figure out how we're going to triple our income and create generational change.
Yeah. Do you think artists think about that, or do they just like the lifestyle? I mean, it seems rare that artists think about the generational wealth and being able to really hold on to and build an empire. It seems like they get attracted to, the lifestyle and the things. And I mean, I look at it and I'm like, damn, it would be sick to be a rapper. It would be like awesome to be on tour and live that life. But at the end of the day, all those things are fleeting.
I think artists, initially, like when they first come into the game, you're just worrying about being an MC. You're worrying about creating. And certain artists can break out of that habit. As we can see, the majority don't. I don't know the exact reason why. I think guys just have they have unrealistic expectations on even guys right now. Like, there's guys, I'm 40, there's guys a little older than me, still assuming that they're gonna get like some sort of like major label to come in and
there it is.
Got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, somebody called. I don't know what the hell happened. It just
no stress.
Yeah, but for me, I can only speak for myself. I've always had realistic expectations of what I was gonna be and what I wasn't gonna be, and I think I'm a pretty good lyricist, right? A lot of people consider me an elite lyricist. But just because I'm an elite lyricist, just because I do something well, that doesn't mean that's my path, right? That doesn't mean that all right, there's 40 good rappers in the circle, but we don't know how to do anything else except rap. And I think artists struggle with that early on because they have this sort of like interpretation of that things are supposed to go the way they want it to go, and they just have a hard time adjusting. And the ones that succeed are the ones that are able to post and pivot.
Yeah. Well, I think they become stubborn in the mindset of like they've identified, they almost built it into their identity. Like, I'm an MC or I'm a rapper. And that's what they tell themselves. That's what they tell everybody. And for them to be successful in other arenas almost goes against your identity, because you're like starting to, like, no one wants to turn around and go, hey, it wasn't working. But that's what people should do. They should be like, hey, I am still a rapper. I'm still an MC, but I'm also developing as this. I'm building into this. And then all of a sudden, you've got a skill set of 3, 4, 5, 6 different skills. And as you said, when you go head to head in the competition, it's like, well, you two are similar in your lyrical skill set, but you add all these other skills, all of a sudden you come out a huge winner.
Yeah, I've always walked in a room and, I looked at everybody in the room and I said, okay, this guy does this guy does this guy does this. I need to walk in this same space and be the one that you can't replace. So let me learn all these different skill sets with additional skill sets. So when it's time to eliminate, because we always in the elimination process, I'm the first one that they're like, we have to keep this guy. And I found massive success in maintaining that strategy. I don't know why other people don't see it the same way. A lot of that has to do with ego. We deal with like a really like ego, macho, machismo type of society and community when it comes to rap music. But again, you have to kind of look at the most successful people and how do they move. And you need to not only model yourself after that, but figure out a way to develop and be better. And I think a lot of artists struggle in that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, you would have seen the difference between success and non-success. And I mean, you've spoken to so many people. Is there anything that sticks out to you in terms of like the conversations that you've had, things that you're picking up on from those people who are constantly succeeding?
Not direct conversation. I think I get something from everyone. I get something from everyone, but I think the best thing that I've learned just in general, just watching everyone move and the people that I've been able to conversate with and learn from is just understanding that this is a business. I think, just people struggle with that. They just think it's rap music. Let me just make the best record I can, and all of a sudden it's gonna go. And it just doesn't work that way at all. Like you have to understand the way that the algorithm, whatever you want to call it, operates. Also understand how you actually going to capitalize off it and be financially successful. People think that you're going to upload a record and it's going to go. It doesn't work that way. Like, what is your target audience? Who's listening to you? Learn to read the data. I think the most thing that has helped me is learning search engine optimization. Search engine optimization is the reason why I got on National Geographic. Just understanding like, okay, well, if people search for a certain term, how do I end up in the top 5 of that term? If people are searching podcasting, how does your show? So where were we? I forgot.
You were talking about the biggest thing that you learned was SEO, search engine optimization.
Yeah. So search engine optimization. Me learning coding and JavaScript. That was the thing that changed my life. Like I wouldn't even be on Shade 45 if it wasn't for me learning that. I figured out a way to rank myself at the top of Google when it comes to nutcrackers. If you're in Australia, so if you're listening right now, it's like Jungle Juice, for example. And I just figured out a way, like when you search the term nutcracker, like it would just pop in the top, 5 links, and that's how National Geographic found me. And that one skill set that I learned literally changed my life and put me in the position that I'm in now.
Well, let me ask you about that National Geographic documentary, because I was so interested when I was watching it and you were talking about it. Did you ever feel like it's risky? Because, I mean, you're not talking about doing something that's legal, but you are getting filmed and you are obviously having your face, you've got your name on there and you're showing them how you move. What was your thought process to accept something like that?
Well, first, I had to come that was going to, right? Because I'm exposing it. Like I can't go the next day and sell liquor in the street anymore. Um, but I did it more because I was banking on that someone would see my personality. Like it, and you don't meet many people. You can't just in your Rolodex and call someone that you know has been on National Geographic. I mean, this is the biggest television station in the world. So, first I had to realize that this whole entire income stream would be over. But second, be confident enough in myself to know that I'll be able to replace it with something else. And ultimately, that was radio, right? I didn't know that's what it was going to be. But, by the look of the draw, and again, me not taking no for an answer, me learning certain skill sets, going back to search engine optimization, like, just me taking the time to learn that shit. That little detail that I learned is the reason why they even found me. Like they were searching for jungle juice and, what is a nutcracker? And they found me at the top of the list. I was ranked number 2 behind the nutcracker play. So, who is this guy? Who the fuck is this guy? Right. And, and I get an inbox from National Geographic on Facebook. And then at first you're like, this is bullshit. And they're like, no, we're serious. Like we're coming from London. We want to meet you, want to talk to you. This is what we have. We have this episode called Moonshine Mayhem. We have a bunch of guys in Arkansas that are some moonshine. We want to urbanize it a little bit. And we want to talk to you. And they came and I had one conversation with, hey.
Sorry, what was that last bit? You just cut out for a moment.
I said, they flew in from London. I had one conversation with them for about a half hour. And like, all right, we want to include you in the documentary. We're going to start filming the next day. And that was that.
Damn, they weren't mucking around. They knew exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, no, they were very, if you watch National Geographic in general, remember, they're not really selling to an urban audience. They're selling to an audience that lives like in middle America or in like the suburbs, and they're just interested with certain things. So they tend to have a lot of urbanization on their program. So if you watch the rest of the episode, they're in like jukeboxes and, random woods in Arkansas and these places. They needed like some, like a city vibe into it. And that's kind of like why I came in. And man, that was the best decision that I made in my life. Going on National Geographic. My mother thought I was crazy, completely psycho. Like you're going on National Geographic, you don't have a mask, you don't have nothing. But I'm like, I'm telling my mother, I'm like, and my wife, like, first of all, I'm selling liquor, right? So this is like a legal thing that I'm selling that they're saying is illegal. And then again, I'm not actually selling the alcohol on the program. I'm selling myself. I'm banking on, someone seeing me and saying, yo, this guy is slick, the way he talks, his personality is dope, and that potentially even leading to a big opportunity.
Yeah. It's so interesting because like I'm hearing your perspective. I'm hearing the perspective of people close to you. And I agree with both of you. Like I agree with their perspective that like it is risky, that like, yeah, you are putting your face on there, that you essentially now can't do that anymore. And then on the flip side, opportunity is everything. And you have an opportunity to be on National Geographic that will never happen again. Like this is your one chance. And if you say no to it, well, then all of a sudden you're filled with regret because you don't know what could have happened.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was the key thing, what you said. And people have asked me about it, but no one has ever said that. And that is key. Like, this will never happen again. This is one thing that I will never get an opportunity to do again. So I didn't even hesitate. It wasn't even a second thought. It was like, I'm going to do this. I at this time I was really heavy in the film space, and I was also heavy in the modeling space as well. And that's not what I want to do forever. There is some sort of bigger calling. I don't know what it is, but hopefully on the other side of National Geographic, there'll be a reward that I'm glad that I took.
Yeah. Well, I think it's people ask, there's a joke that's like, there's a devout man who believes in God and he's drowning at sea. And he's praying to God. He's saying, God, help me, help me. A boat comes and they're like, hey, man, do you want to come on? We'll save you. He's like, no, God will save me. So he goes. So the boat leaves. Then there's another boat that comes. It's like, hey, we're here to save you. Do you want help? And he's like, no, God will save me. God will save me. The man ultimately dies and he's up in heaven. He's like, God, what the hell? You didn't save me. And he's like, who do you think sent the boats? Yeah. And so it's the same thing that like, hey, we look for these opportunities. We wish we get a chance. And we sometimes look at them and we're like, no, thanks. And then we're like, what is going on? And we're wondering. And, you showed that like you had that chance. You had the vision to be like, well, this is what I've been waiting for. I've been waiting for an opportunity. You don't know how it manifests or where it fits in, but it's better to take it and see what it comes rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I saw a very interesting short documentary on Will Smith when he jumps over the Grand Canyon for his like 50th birthday. And the one thing that I took about it, which is very prevalent to this conversation, he had said that on the other side of fear is a reward. And I think fear blocks us all. Like fear blocks us from doing certain things, but you never know what's on the other side of that. And sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, whether you're bungee jumping all over the Grand Canyon or whether you're going on National Geographic. You just never know what could be on the other side of that. And we can't let our fear or our personal doubts stop our destiny. And I think that's kind of like, just what people go through on a day-to-day basis. And, thank God that I've gained the wisdom to understand that it's important for me to face what's fearful to me, face what's scary to me, because what could be on the other side, potentially I can garnish so much more than just being scared of it.
Yeah. And we all have fears. That's the thing. It's weird when people say, I'm not scared of anything. And I'm like, you motherfucker, I know you're scared of something. Like it may not be like anything that's like scary to you, but it may be something internal where you've got a demon that you're fighting. It might not be heights, but it might be like, hey, I'm scared of being in a room with these type of people. I don't feel comfortable. I'm scared I'll be found out. Like whatever it might be, but we all have fears we have to overcome. And the successful people, the ones who overcome them. I mean, even you taking the leap of faith of going on the radio, people are hearing your voice now. Or it's like the backlash that you think could happen from people hearing your voice, that's like an insecurity. I mean, that's what I was scared of, is like people are going to start hearing my voice, hear what I have to say, and then be like, man, shut the fuck up, which doesn't not happen. But also it's like, you kind of just have to get over it and accept that could be a reality, but it's worth the risk.
Yeah, I mean, and I got to commend you because you're like one of the best interviewers that I've been on, because it's so like fluent conversation. A lot of times, you talk to people and it's like very like A, B, and C. So it's like predetermined, like I'm going to bing, bing, bing. And that's one of the most important things with radio and podcasting. You just got to have kind of a fluent conversation, and you often get the best material out of it. So, again, to anyone that's listening right now, face your fears, because the reward on the other side can be so beneficial to you. But you never know unless you face it, you stand in front of it and accept that this is something you're scared of, but also accept that you can be rewarded for stepping to it directly.
And you actually will be. That's what I found, is like, you're just scared because there's that self-doubt. And sometimes I think it's fear of success. I think some people, like, we genuinely have a fear of success, that if I'm successful, that means that I all of a sudden have responsibilities and I owe something to people because I've put myself out there and I've leveled up. And that scares a lot of people into just doing the same shit day in, day out, because it's way easier to complain.
Mhm. And it's also way easier to accept your current situation instead of going out there and changing it. I think that's the most important thing. You know, you are where the fuck you are because you want to be there. And, you know, this is an open society. Go out there, get the bag, and do whatever you want to do. Don't limit yourself, as we said earlier in the conversation.
Well, I mean, I was watching Dave, Lil Dicky's TV show yesterday, and I was just objectively like, no one would have thought that was possible for him. Like, no one would have been like, you know, he's a skinny little white dude. He looks scrawny. He's got this like weird personality. You know, it flies against almost everything that hip hop is, but he went for it. And he just, like, you just stick to your guns. You know what you bring to the table. It's unique. It's special. And he fits in the space at the same time as we have people like Rick Ross and Griselda, as you mentioned. And it's like this whole landscape, but ultimately, like, no one believes you until you believe yourself.
And that is the first thing. You know, you can't sell something unless you believe in it, right? And we're all trying to sell a product that we can feed our families off of. And you know, and people are gonna tell you you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't fucking do that. But you know, you should live on a day-to-day basis that you want to prove motherfuckers wrong, period, at all times. Right? If they say you can't do something, just go out and fucking do it. Stop complaining, stop looking at the phone screen. Get out there and learn and figure out how to do it. And you actually might do it better than other people. You never know unless you try.
That's what motivated me. You know, I had someone I know who say, like, who are you going to interview? Like, who's going to want to talk to you? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. But that's not the point. Obviously, at the beginning, I'm not starting with people like yourself. I'm not starting with accomplished people, but I know that. But ultimately, I'm going to start speaking to people I genuinely like and respect. And I'm just going to keep working at it. Like, that's the whole point of, and so that doubt made me go, I'm going to show you who I'm going to start talking to, and I'm going to work at it, and I'm not going to give up.
And here we are, right? Connecting from, you from Australia, right?
Yeah, Melbourne, Australia.
Oh man, how's the weather out there? Is it good?
It's winter at the moment, so it was raining yesterday. So I kind of wish I was, because I wish I was in New York right now. I hear the weather's pretty nice, but I'm heading over in October for a couple of weeks, so we should get some at least some decent weather. We're on the opposite ends of the scale just before it gets cold for you guys.
So your hot months are what, January, February?
Yeah, December, Jan, Feb. Although it's usually late. January, Feb are usually the hottest. We usually have a late summer.
Like, so like how hot does it get over there? Like, what is the average summer temperature?
I know this is probably not helpful at all, but I can give you Celsius. But okay. I think it's like, it ranges from probably between 25 to 40. I'd say 25 to 35 is the usual, but we'll hit like 40 plus. So I think we'll hit 100 for sure, plus a couple of times throughout that period. But it's a really hot sun. Like, it is scorching, so you got to be careful under it.
Nice. I actually got to get over there. Are there kangaroos everywhere? Like, I see it like on like on the History Channel, like kangaroos just running around.
I mean, yeah, I ride a kangaroo to work every day.
No,
I'm kidding. Yeah, no. Obviously, inner city, you don't see that stuff very much, but it's like when you get further out. But like, yeah, there's wombats and kangaroos that jump across the road. So you got to be careful in like a little bit further outside of the city, because they do just jump across, and kangaroos are fucking strong as shit. Like, they're so strong. And wombats, they look small, but they're also like boulders. So you genuinely have to be careful when you're driving on those roads.
Really? So probably like a kangaroo would be like a deer in America, right?
Yeah.
Like on the outskirts, you see deer everywhere, and they just dart across the road. So I don't actually live in New York. I live in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is like 90 miles out of New York City. It is a very mountainy area. So it tends to be cold, not city cold. I find it actually warmer than New York, But in Pennsylvania, you'll see the shit that you don't see in New York. In New York, you just got pigeons and squirrels. In Pennsylvania, you got deers, you got wild turkeys. I mean, you got all the fucking bears. There's a fucking mountain lion running around my community right now.
Yeah, that is insane to me. People think like Australia's nuts, and to be fair, it is crazy with the amount of stuff that will kill you. But like, you guys genuinely have lions. Like a mountain lion is a thing. Like, and yeah, you just said like my community has a mountain lion. I've never said a sentence like that where like my community is scared of a bear or a mountain lion, attacking people.
Yeah, we got mountain lions and we have a shitload of black bears.
Have you ever seen a black bear?
I find that black bears are interesting. The man's almost like the few black bears. I'll tell you a story. So when I first bought my house in Pennsylvania, I moved my mom. I moved her from New York to Pennsylvania. Me and her were going to the garbage to throw out, whatever trash that we had. And we turned the corner of my house, and there is a huge black bear, and he got on his 2 feet, and he must have been like 10 feet tall at that moment. And me and my mom, like, we're from the Bronx. So like I said, in the Bronx is literally fucking pigeons and squirrels. That's it. Like, you don't see shit. You don't see fish. You don't see nothing. And me and my mom was looking up at this nigga. And then like he, it was weird because like he got up and then he got down and he went into the corner and he started pouting like a dog. The black bear, because he was just really just trying to get whatever food he could find into the garbage can. And then he skirted off into the woods. And I said, you know what? I immediately have to put a light on the side of my house. I had no light at that moment. I didn't want sensor lights. I'm like, no, this is crazy.
What was the feeling like of coming face to face with a black bear for the first time?
Man, I couldn't even think about it. There was nothing to think about because it's like we literally turned the corner where we had our trash at, and he was there like destroying the garbage. So I almost have one of the moments like if I don't move, he won't see me. Because he stood up and it's like, holy shit. This animal will fling you like, if he wanted to. But like I said, like the mannerisms was weird. It was almost like a dog. I can't explain it. And I've seen a few black bears like living in Pennsylvania. They kind of don't interact with you. As long as you leave them alone, they'll just go about their business. You're not gonna stop and take a picture with them. You're not gonna be like this with a selfie with a black bear. Like you're like, oh shit, let me get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction as I was imagining myself in your position, I'd be like, oh fuck. Like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like it would be like, I think at that moment you realize how not invincible you are as a person, where you come face to face with literally a killing machine like that.
Well, not only invincible, but you also start to understand that you're not in control of any of this shit, right? And that leads back to the hip hop combo because it's like you're just not in control of your destiny. You're not in control of day to day. Like you can step outside and get hit by a fucking truck. I mean, you can only control whatever you can. So the object is to make the best of it and be skillful enough in anything that you can control and just let destiny take its course.
Well, I think there's a saying that I've been saying to people close around me is control the controllables. And whatever else happens, you have to adapt to. Because and you can only worry about what's in your control. And I think in a certain way, like I personally don't really watch news or anything like that because I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Like we're talking about people who are worlds away from me, and I can only contribute what I can contribute, and I got to focus on what makes me better and what continues to improve me. I think some people are we talk about fear, but they're scared of like all these big broker decisions as they don't do anything because they're like the world is going to end, but it's like that's just stopping you from being a contributor and finding your purpose.
Yeah, yeah, that's super important. I mean, again, you can just be the best person that you can be. You can't stop anything that's happening. Life is changing rapidly. Obviously, COVID kicked our ass. We're potentially on the brink of a third world war, right? And if you look at humanity as a total, these are the years that all these things start happening, right? I think the first World War was in 1918, the second one was in the 1940s, right? And we're kind of around that time where shit starts happening. The Spanish flu was a big thing. I don't know what year that was, but in the beginning of the century, this is kind of like where shit starts to happen. And then in the latter part of the years, that's when they figure out how to calm it down. With the development of technology, the development of rapid societies and new communities and stuff, we just got to remain vigilant and just we got to try to take care of each other. I don't think we're doing a good job of that right now.
Yeah, I think we're too quick to point at your differences and mine. Like, they're too quick to be like, hey, you're different to me because of XYZ, and I'm different to you because of XYZ. And so you have this niche, really small community, but that is the wrong way to go, because we're just creating division across everybody. Like, you don't want 1,000 communities of like 5 people who are like, well, I only trust these 5 people and I can't communicate with these people because they disagree or they look a certain way or whatever it is. Like, I think we've almost gone too far. We need to go back to like, hey, how do we actually work together and communicate effectively?
One of the reasons is social media. I talk about this with my wife all the time. Social media has made us antisocial. Our generation is the last generation of social people. When you look at our kids, I mean, these guys are super antisocial. You would think that they would be, because of TikTok, but they're used to meeting people like this. They have no personal interaction with people. So this is a safe space, right? Where it's like, if you don't like something I say, or I don't like something you say, you just shut it off, right? In person is a lot different. And I think the younger society, younger generation doesn't know how to deal with it because they've been trained to operate a certain way, right? So it's like, how do we find like a healthy balance of, okay, continue with the digital age, but we need some sort of personal interactions.
Well, I think the one thing they haven't learned is how to listen.
No.
People have asked me what helps me do what I do. And you said, I'm very thankful for the compliment of like, this is a flowing conversation. It's fluid. The only thing that I do is I just listen to you. That is it. Like, I'm genuinely interested. I'm listening. There's no, like, I'm not looking for a reason to disagree. And if you listen, you're going to find more commonality and you're going to be able to have a conversation. But if you're if you can't listen, it's never going to work.
Correct. But how does a generation listen when they have so much information, just on this device that I'm talking to you on? So they think they know everything. They have access to all the information. And that kind of, damages their personality in a sense. I've raised 5 kids, right? And they're all different in a way, but the one common ground is that they feel like they know every fucking thing because they're on the fucking phone all day. So they have access to all the information. They can tell you an answer quicker than I could tell you when I was their age. Because we actually had to go get a book or like wait to go to school to get the answer. They just pull the shit up. These fucking kids are writing essays on Chat GPT and all types of shit. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just a different time and we just gotta all learn to adjust. But I think, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 40. And I think, my generation is the last generation of personal interaction, right? It's like, you didn't have, you had beepers back in the day, you had a cell phone, you didn't have this where we could video conference literally on other sides of the world, right? So like, how do you tell a generation to operate when they can do this at the palm of their hands all the time? This is all they know. It's like a very difficult space to be in.
Yeah. Well, I'm 29, so like I started life without this. And so as I've gotten older, it like started happening in high school and then obviously with phones and then, Zoom with work. But and then being able to do this stuff. But I think the key differentiator is a fact doesn't mean you understand. Like,
correct.
Okay, so you and I can Google it and okay, I've got an answer, but that actually doesn't mean anything because there's no context, there's no lesson applied. So like, I feel like the real thing that they're missing out on is, okay, I write an essay with ChatGPT, but I didn't learn anything. Like I just did
Correct.
it. And so like, I think ultimately, like when it comes to like your generation and my generation, it's like, okay, the true way to learn is by asking questions and by talking. Like it's so simple, but like that's the real way to learn, is to listen to people who are having a conversation. That's why podcasts are so big, because it's literally just true. A few people talking, and you get to hear the context of what they're talking about, and you don't have to agree, whatever. But most people are just learning through that or through videos. But I think long form is really big. Although we see like, we see reels and all that kind of stuff, TikTok, but I think long form always has a place.
Yeah, long form content. I had someone ask me, they were complaining about attention spans. And, they were calling in like, oh, there's no attention spans. And I'm like, people don't have attention spans for non-information. If you're not giving anybody any information, they're just going to listen to you for a minute because you ain't talking about shit. But people are also able to watch Joe Rogan for 4 hours or Drink Champs for 4 hours, even listen to us talk for an hour and a half, because there's some sort of informative aspect behind it, right? So information is super key, is super superb. And I think we also have to figure out how to get back to teaching people stuff. And, giving someone of value instead of giving something that's just valuable to them right now. Like, what can you take from my interaction with you that can impact your life or you can grow and learn from, not just having a good time at this moment. And I think that is the difference between my generation. I mean, you're 29, so you was born, what, 94?
Yeah.
Yes, you were born in 94, so you're like in the middle.
Yeah.
You're like in the middle. Like when you were 10, there was sidekicks out. There wasn't like a super advanced computer. Like people, I think at that time, people were still going through like AOL dial-up at that time, right? So, how do we merge the generations and make it make sense for everyone?
I think it starts at school though, because we're in this model of the right answer is what is acceptable, but we're not taught how to think. That's what really I find frustrating, is like if we taught philosophy at school, I wonder what the difference would be. Of like, philosophy is just the practice of how do you think, how do you get to the answers you get to, how do you question effectively. And as I've gotten older, I've started to really like get into that side of things, but I think we don't actually contemplate of like, okay, that's the right answer, but how do we get there? How is that the right answer, rather than like, oh, congratulations, you got the right one, tick, move on.
So how do you find like the school curriculum and like Australian culture? Is it like similar to America? Is it?
It's similar. I mean, obviously I haven't been to school for a long time, so I can only talk about my own experience. But I found the most valuable classes personally, the one where like in English you talk about a book and the ideas in the book, and like, okay, this is what you think about it, but why do you think that? Or we talk about history, and I loved history, and it's like, hey, these are the events, this is what some person says about it, this is what someone else says about it, what do you think about it and why? And like, what do you think the landscape was? And it's like forcing yourself to critically evaluate your own thinking so that you can then explain it to somebody else. Those were always the most valuables. But like, I was okay at maths. I just never liked it that much. I stopped doing science in year 10. It was just like, nah, pass. But those other ones, the humanities, that was for me the most valuable. And I did legal studies. I ended up going to law school and doing all that kind of stuff. But those were the ones that really stuck with me, of like, hey, why do you think the way you do?
like information you can take long term.
Yeah. Like, how do you evaluate it? Like, literally, how do you read a book and what do you think about it? And why do you think that? And prove it.
I think the American curriculum, I went to school in the early 90s, probably late 80s, started school maybe 89. And I think the American curriculum it kind of felt a little bit more like they were trying to rewrite history or just, tell you what they wanted you to know. I'm in like a little underpass. They just wanted to tell you what it is that they wanted you to know. Instead of that's a disservice to teaching, right? So just like on topic. So I recently found out that the person that built the Empire State Building is, at one time was the biggest building in the world, also built a facility that created the atomic bomb.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, why don't teach you the contrast? His last name is DuPont. It's DU space points. So he's an architect. Well, he wasn't an architect. He was a person that created mass weapons. And then the government attacked him. And then he kind of went into engineering, and he owned General Motors for a while. And he was in a race with Walter Chrysler, who created the Chrysler building. Obviously, owns Dodge, owns Chrysler. And they were in a battle to create two big buildings. They created the Chrysler building, and then he just went crazy and created the Empire State Building. And when America decided to get into World War II, after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, FDR, Roosevelt, he went and recruited DuPont to create the facility that created the atomic bomb. So the irony of it is like why they don't teach us this from the beginning. He teaches that the Empire State Building is such a standard of beauty and American culture, and this is the thing we need to look forward to. But why don't you teach us that the same person that built that also built something to destroy multiple communities and multiple lives and kill like damn near 3 million people? I think that would be proper education if they laid that out for us in the beginning.
Well, I think you and I both know the reason to that, and that's because the truth is ugly, and it is easier to teach someone with no flaws than someone who's flawed. And
correct.
I mean, I look at every historical figure. We don't talk about their flawed characters. Like, I mean, they all did fucked up shit, but that's the whole point, I guess, is like they're all humans. And I think it's almost demotivating to people. They're looking at all these historical figures who have no flaws, quote unquote, but they did, and we never talk about it. So it makes you feel like shit because you're like, well, why do I feel like I do all these bad things or I've made these mistakes compared to these amazing people, and I can never stack up?
Yeah, man. If we painted the whole picture to our kids from the beginning, I think the world will be a much different place in general. They kind of just tell you what they think you should know instead of telling you what you need to know. And this is the problem with society, across the entire world, right? So, if we want to correct certain situations, it starts with the kids, but it also starts with not doing a disservice to them by misfeeding them information.
Yeah. Well, it's like this, you think your parents are flawless as kids, and then the older you get, you start to see them as people, and you're like, damn, they're just people trying to make it work. Like they had no idea, like we have no idea, and they're just doing their best.
Yeah. And that's just kind of like the way the world and society works, right? So
yeah,
got to learn to adjust.
Well, man, we've literally talked about everything under the sun today, and I feel like we could just talk forever, honestly, like it just flowed so seamlessly. But I only have one more question for you. It's the hardest question that I ask on the show, the only question that I plan on the show. But if you had to recommend one album that everybody should listen to at least once to get an appreciation of, can be any genre of music, cannot be your own music, what would it be?
Illmatic. I mean, Illmatic is not only is the greatest hip hop album, it is the description of urban culture from a 16-year-old. You know, in all this conversation that we're having about misinformation and intelligence, just phantom that. Like, the greatest rap album of all time was written by a 16-year-old. It was descriptive. It was storytelling. It was just an amazing work of art and poetry and production. And man, if I could tell people to take one album, I would tell them to take Illmatic, because Illmatic was just the perfect definition of who we are as people, especially in the urban society. And I think it properly tells the right tale.
Well, I agree. One of the greatest albums ever made and iconic. And I mean, Nas is having a resurgence, speaking of an artist who's been able to do it along throughout their whole career. But his projects these days, I listen to and I'm like, holy shit. Like, they are genuinely amazing to listen to. So, I mean, he's a great example of an artist who found his voice, kind of went off, did his thing, and came back and is just like, yeah, it's good. I mean, his album the King Disease trilogy is just unbelievable.
Killing it. And I'm looking forward. I hope we're going to get the Nas and DJ Premier album at some time. At some point. I'm looking forward to maybe that happening. That
would be amazing. And speaking of amazing, obviously the one and only, the Inphamus Amadeuz. For anyone who hasn't checked him out, please make sure you do. There's music that's coming out. There is his radio show, man. You're literally doing it all, but it's been a pleasure for me to speak to someone who's so accomplished and literally been doing it like a dream come true for a lot of people if they could have the career you've been having. But man, is there anything you wanted to plug, anything you wanted to shout out?
Man, well, my next album is coming, the 10 tape. I know a lot of people have been a little disappointed because I've been doing more production. So like Infamous Life and the Soul with Rakim's son Tamel. That's just, me producing. But there is a rap album coming from me this year. It's called the 10 tape. It'll be available October 27th. I have Soul For Real, the group that sang Candy Rain, on it. I have Mom Thug, Rampage for Flip Mode. Like, I have a lot of content on there, and I hope people are going to be receptive to my album. And then, of course, I tap in with the Punchline Academy, my freestyle cipher, Shade 45 every single Thursday, noon EST for the new hip-hop picks, 3 p.m. EST for the throwback classics. And thanks to you for having me on the podcast. And I look forward to having some more conversation.
Me too, man. And I think this is the first of many. And as I said, it was a genuine pleasure. I can't wait. And hopefully you get to come out to Australia sometime soon.
Yeah, we got to go to Australia so we can see the kangaroos. Listen, gotta go. Yeah, I'm telling my wife.
Yeah,
see the kangaroos.
Be careful. You might never go back once you start seeing the kangaroos. Yeah. They're amazing.
That's super dope, man. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.